I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside, it's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, "No, no, 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 we're going to do this." And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show. Today on the James Altucher Show.
The guy you're about to listen to is known by the FBI as TipperX. He blew open so many insider trading cases on Wall Street. It's just fascinating to hear his story. So here he is. So Tom Hardin, otherwise known as TipperX, and we'll get to that in a second. I remember back in 2007, you were involved in probably what was then the biggest insider trading case ever. I mean, it was so big, I couldn't even believe it was happening. I mean, arguably Ivan Boesky in like 1987 was bigger, but this was bigger financially wise. Since then, you've been involved in, I don't know, 100 or 50 insider trading cases. You've worked with the FBI, but you started off as a tipper.
Right. Later an informant for the FBI, but before then, like an insider trading tipper. I got tips from another investor, traded past the month. So in the tipping chain.
And so okay, let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
You're working in the financial industry. Like, you grew up, where'd you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Gwinnett County. People don't know it. It's right outside of Atlanta. Father there was a Coca-Cola man his whole career. Mother stayed at home with myself, my two brothers. So middle-class family, North Georgia. Applied to UPenn, got in somehow. And so I was the first of my family to attend Ivy League school, Wharton undergrad, and then started working in the hedge fund business in 2000.
And so, I mean, back in 2000s when I started getting involved in the hedge fund business, but I went a different route. Like, you went the traditional route, which I think is much smarter. I tried to just from scratch with no experience, start a hedge fund. And
Yeah.
I think the traditional route is, school/business school/PhD in physics, or work for a Goldman Sachs, or work for a smaller hedge fund that becomes a bigger hedge fund. And that smaller hedge fund, the guy should have worked at either Goldman Sachs or a larger hedge fund. Like, there's sort of like a pedigree that you have to get to have a really large hedge fund. And that's what I realized when I was raising money, is that I couldn't say, oh yeah, I worked at Goldman Sachs, then I worked at, a Tiger fund, and then blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So you took the traditional route, and it's a way to essentially retire early with hundreds of millions of dollars, at least back then. I don't know if it's the same case now. But so what was the first hedge fund you worked for?
It was a tech-focused hedge fund in Greenwich, Connecticut, about $750 million in assets, close to $1 billion, which at the time was actually quite big. Now it's not as big. So at the time, I was working for a tech-focused fund. My boss was ex-Morgan Stanley, so like you said, he ran the fund there. He's 32 years old. he crushed it in 1999, as they all did. And so he hired me January 2000, months before the top of the tech bubble.
And then you fell apart like everyone else did.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
Yeah, so 2001, 2002, I'm covering tech. I'm 23, 24 years old. A lot of trips to Silicon Valley, trips to Asia. I'm covering like semiconductors, so the foundries are in Asia. But James, pretty early, I've noticed that certain funds were kind of blatantly trading on, I'll call material non-public information, so inside information.
How did you notice that?
People would be at conferences talking about, actually sticking their chest out, talking about contacts they had, like at Taiwan Semiconductor. If you could get the wafer starts every month about their customers, the Xilinxes, the Alteras, those types of companies, you could trade those stocks perfectly on the quarter. Or people knew about other takeovers happening. People would just talk about it kind of out there in the open. But then there was certain hedge funds hiring analysts from tech companies to be their analysts, so they could call back and get the numbers, that type of thing. So this was really happening kind of start of the century. I knew what was going on. I never felt at that point in my career I need to be part of that group. I was already doing quite well. After my first fund, I got hired to be a junior partner at a fund seeded by a very well-known value manager that anybody would know in the industry. So a really great seat in my career. But I knew what was going on.
Can you say who it was?
So yeah, we were actually seeded by Tiger Management.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So you were at a Tiger
a
fund.
seed. Yeah.
But let me ask you a question. Like, so obviously back in the tech age, and not obvious, but what you were just saying is that some hedge funds or some money managers knew in advance what the earnings would be or what companies were getting acquired, and but they knew it sort of like because it was being talked about at conferences. And how much was
Yeah.
gray area and how much was like, hey, tell me, in a back alley, I'll give you some money and you give me
Yeah.
some inside information.
A lot of it was gray, but then there was also, like you said, like sort of like the famous book Black Edge, like the Black Edge, like actually, hey, I have the numbers for so and so. Like my first boss in Greenwich, we had an investor, a limited partner, who was a CEO of a tech company. They would literally talk like every quarter, the day the quarter is coming out. Here's what it's going to be. Like literally, that's blatant insider trading. But I didn't really even think about it, James, at the time. I felt like, well, everybody's doing this. Like there was a guy who just got out of prison a few months ago who wrote a book, Raj Rajaratnam. Like he was out there, talking about sort of contacts and that type of thing he had at these companies, and his people, I suspected, were doing this. Of course, he was later charged, but I didn't really think, oh my God, this is illegal. Like all these guys are doing this is illegal. I thought this is kind of just how it goes, kind of in tech, where it's faster money. The 13 Fs, turned over a lot around events, quarters, that type of thing, takeovers. So I knew what was going on, but I never felt I would ever be part of that because I didn't have those connections inside those companies, inside these companies giving me any information until it happened in my career.
I just want to understand, like, what would be gray area? Like, it seems like if you call an analyst and say, "Hey, I'm hearing the numbers at Altera is going to be really good because Apple's launching a new Macintosh that
Yeah.
uses their chips or whatever." Like, it seems like, is that inside information, or do they just know a lot about the industry and people at Altera confirmed, yeah, we're probably selling something to Apple or Intel or whatever, and then you figured, oh, okay, yeah, the numbers are going to be good, and we'll buy now.
Yeah, I mean that's not illegal inside information. It was more like, but that's the common conversation you'd have. You call up an analyst. Yeah, I'm hearing Altera is going to have a great quarter. They got this new customer, or my analyst in Taiwan is saying that that their activity has picked up a little bit. So it's not specific information. It's not like here's the exact numbers, but it's at least you're trafficking, in a gray area. Now understand the law a little bit better. Like it could be easy to kind of tip over and say, okay, now I have this information. Now I actually have the numbers, which is then illegal. But it's easy to go over that line, but not really tell yourself. It's easy to rationalize, like, well, if everybody else is doing this, then this must be okay.
What's the first time you actually saw like blatant, like you thought to yourself, this is definitely, I don't want to be involved in this. This is definitely illegal inside information.
Yeah. So there was a guy I knew that every quarter he would trade 3 or 4 stocks perfectly. I suspected he must be getting inside information about the quarter. And so he one day before my illegal tip said, would you like to know about this or that? You could trade this. And even at that time, James, I had some training in my career to know that was illegal. And so I felt like, no, that's not what I do. But eventually I became desensitized to that. And eventually I was ready to cross the line in my career. But at that point, I was turning it down. But at some point, I went the other way.
And what was the tipping point, literally?
Yeah, yeah. So yes. So at my second hedge fund, we had a down first quarter in our first month of existence, which really shouldn't have mattered. We had investors with a 3 to 5 year horizon. We were investing thematically. Like what the trade that would have made my career that never happened was long Google, short Yellow Pages. If you remember, there was like several Yellow Page companies that were publicly traded,
Yeah.
and that would have been a career making trade. Long Google, short Yellow Pages, go to the beach. So we had
Yeah.
these thematic trades on. We lost money in the first quarter. My boss came into my office, closed the door, and said, "Tom, I know we're investing thematically, but honestly, as you know, we're a small hedge fund. If we don't start putting up monthly numbers, our people are, they're going to pull money. We're not going to be able to raise." And so, kind of like the ambiguity in his message to do what it takes to meet shorter term goals definitely set the stage in some part, I think, for my future decision making. And James, like a few months later, I got a call from another analyst that I knew who had worked for Rajaratnam, and she said, "Tom, you've made me a lot of money over the last few years on some great ideas. Like I would give her my best idea every year." And she's like, "I have something for you." And James, she said, a Moody's analyst at the bond rating agency who was roommates with her cousin told her a company, Kronos, was going to be acquired next week, this date, this price by this private equity firm. Like I've never gotten a call in my career like that before. So I knew.
What was her incentive to call you with that? Like, was she really just doing quote unquote a favor, or did she want more ideas from you later, or
Yeah,
like what
so
was that all, or was there some psychological thing? She just wanted to show you she had good stuff too.
I think it was a favor. Like a lot of these situations, it's like a gift to a friend. So I think that's how it started. But later, the FBI, we'll get to later, would ask me, why would she do that? And I think they thought that she was grooming me. She was 20 years older than me, I think. And so they thought maybe she thought in my career I would be able to reciprocate this information in the future. So she told me
I
this was
see.
happening. And I didn't make any trades on it at that point. Like I had the training, like, okay, this sounds like, so in that movie Wall Street where it's like blue horseshoe type of jargon, like this is happening next week. But James, later that day, I was talking to a friend at another firm who worked at a prop trading firm, and he was down that month. We were talking. He's like, "Dude, are you hearing anything out there I could put a short-term trade on?" And kind of as a throwaway comment, I said, "I got this weird call from this woman this morning saying this Moody's analyst told her this company Kronos is going to be acquired next week." And just pausing right there, like anybody listening that's familiar with this would know now I could be charged with insider trading just for tipping the information, and I haven't traded yet.
So even though you've made no money and he's made no money, and you weren't paid for this information, just saying the information that could cause someone to make money in the stock market, that's enough to get a charge for insider trading.
At least civilly, if I'm tipping, I said, here's the date, here's the price, here's the private equity company. They're like, that's enough. Where I could be charged at least by the SEC, which has a lower burden of proof than the Department of Justice.
And could you go to jail for that?
Usually not civilly, no. Usually it has to be criminal. I mean, it's possible, but really the SEC would be more civil if you're tipping them in PI and not trading. But it would have been in my career anyways, even if it's just a civil charge, not the criminal charge.
Right, like they could basically take your career away somehow. They could say you're not allowed to
Yeah,
trade in securities again.
right. If it was just SEC versus Thomas Hardin, this person tipped this information, as you know, you can't, career's over.
And if you made some money, they can maybe make you return it.
Disgorge it. Yeah, yeah. And so this guy tells everybody at his firm, "Hey, this is happening in a few weeks." They load up. He calls me back and he's like, "Tom, did you buy some?" And as the junior partner, so imagine my two-person firm, it was just me and my boss. As the junior analyst, I could initiate a stock position in our portfolio and not have to talk to my boss as long as it was less than 1% of the assets that we managed. And I bought a 0.9% position in the portfolio in Kronos, and I totally just rationalized it. I felt like if these other guys are making millions of dollars doing it at these conferences, they're talking about it, there's no way I would ever be caught trading so small. I felt like I wasn't hurting anybody just buying the stock before everybody else. I've now committed securities fraud by buying this stock, but I still thought I was a great guy, like doing a moral weight in my head. Like, I volunteer at my church. I do all this stuff. I could buy this stock and still feel like I was a great guy. I felt I would just do it just this
Well,
once.
also there's huge, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's huge financial incentives.
Yes.
Like, so you could argue, I'm going to make money and do well for my family, and then there's the kind of philosophical issues about insider trading, which we could get to in a little bit. But let's just talk about what those financial incentives are. You were at what you called $1 billion fund, and it was just you and one other guy. I didn't realize that. So you're a $1 billion
Oh, we were 100
fund.
million. My
Just the
second was 100 million. So my first fund was $1 billion where I was an analyst. The second fund was a $100 million fund, which still for two people could turn out to something great. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's look at the financial aspects of that. A hedge fund, for people who don't know, if hedge fund charges let's say, and I'm assuming yours did, what's called a 2 and 20. So 2% of all fees per year. So on a $100 million fund, the two partners basically just get $2 million to split up, and you have no real excess cost. Back in 2000, you didn't have to hire like a risk
Right.
management officer and all sorts of back office. It was just the two of you guys. So it's 2 million just upfront, no matter how you do. Even if you're down 80%, you get that 2 million, and then you get 20% of the profit. So if you make 20% that year, the 100 million turns into 120, $20 million in profits. You would get 20% of that, so another 4 million. So altogether, 6 million in profits between you and just one other guy. And that returning 20% in 1999 would not have been unusual, and 2000 your expectations or 2001 your expectations were probably similar. So and he was the senior partner, you were the junior partner. But if you guys did well, you would raise money, go from 100 million to a billion, no problem, because you both had good pedigrees and you've a good track record. And B, if you just return 20%, the firm makes 6 million. Maybe you would make 1.5 million of that, and you're a young guy. How old were you then?
So the trade actually happened in 2007. So I was 28 years old. So yeah, like
28 still. Grew up in,
yeah,
your dad worked for Coca-Cola all his life.
yeah,
And so there's huge financial incentive to, hey, do like one or two good trades. And then you probably are also rationalizing and thinking, well, how can they catch me? Even if
yeah,
they call me and say, why did you make this trade? You can say, oh, I heard this was just a great
yeah.
company. I like the company. I did research. You probably did your research, and this is a good company. And I didn't know they were getting acquired. Well, this one woman says that you knew. And I'm like, I talked to her, but she didn't say anything about acquisition. I mean, she would have had to have recorded it and basically prove you were lying, and it's your word against hers. And probably you wouldn't have thought she was recording it for whatever reason. So, like, how would they have caught you even in that case?
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, I felt, yeah, I would never get caught, and I never even considered the amount of money I was making. So on the less than 1% position, um, it was really, I didn't think about, oh, I'm going to make a bunch of money. I just felt like, well, I'm now a part of this end group, like these guys that are doing it. I wasn't a part of that group, and now that she called me with this tip, and I'm making this trade, I kind of felt, I hate to say it, like a sense of like puffery. Like now I could stick my chest out, go to the conferences the next week, and say, hey, I knew about this deal happening. I might know about other deals. And like they would put their arms around me and say, okay, now you're part of our group. What else do you know? And so I think that sense of just wanting to be a part of that group that I wasn't definitely played a part in some of that, my psychology with this trade. And yeah, I never considered ever being caught, as you said. Like if they weren't catching the big guys, they would never look at me. And felt like I would always be able to like cover my tracks, have a cover story, like you said. Maybe I'd find an analyst report saying this company was cheap and that's why I bought it. So always felt like I could get myself out of this if I was ever asked about it.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues to or these different sports to to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. I've written a lot about this and I've read the SEC cases on insider trading. The typical case is actually not a very large case. Like you said, one of the things is, oh, we were small, but maybe back then you were small relative to other people doing it. But I would say the typical case is somebody who has a consistent set of behavior on like small companies. So maybe someone who's like the dentist of a lawyer gets like tips about small companies being acquired, but consistently, like they're a dental assistant and they consistently seem to buy like options the day before acquisitions on like 10 in a row. And then that raises a red flag at the SEC. Like just doing it once probably doesn't even put you on a list of like questionable, transactions. You're just doing it once, they don't know. You'd have to show up like repeatedly for them to look at you. It's not like there's a million people at the SEC. So I think on how do you think she found her information?
So I think she was talking to one of her cousins was the roommate of a Moody's analyst. So the Moody's analyst, I would later learn as a side hustle, was selling this information to her. And so she was paying this guy for this information, trading it, and then gave it to me as a gift. So this happened 4 times. So it wasn't, if I had just stopped on that one trade, it probably maybe not would have been caught, but it happened 3 more times. Like the tips from her, the small trades, the 0.9% positions. My boss always looking the other way. So again, him not asking me questions, I kind of felt like, well, this is okay. Again, he's about 20 years older than I am. He's the closest thing I had to a mentor. He's not calling me out on these well-timed trades. By the 3rd trade, James, she actually asked me for a cash payoff for her source of information. And she's like, Tom, can you write this guy a check? Like, he knows who you are. This is the 3rd one I'm giving you. So she was kind of setting me up to get to pay her source. I totally freaked out.
Yeah, on that, I would almost think she's trying to trap me.
Yeah. So I thought, holy shit. Like, she's like, can you write this guy a check? And of course, I'm like, well, that's illegal. There's no way I would do that. Are you crazy? And so the guys that I was tipping with the tips, I asked them, can you pass the hat around? And literally one of them came and gave me an envelope of $15,000 in a FedEx envelope. I'm going through LaGuardia Airport to meet her. I'm going to a conference that week in California where she lives. I'm going to give this to her. I actually, going through TSA at that time, I put all the cash bills on my body to walk through the scanner. It didn't set the scanner off. I went into the restroom, put it in my carry-on. As my flight was called to board, there was actually 2 TSA agents at the gate of my flight, randomly stopping passengers and searching their carry-ons. And so when they got to my group, obviously I was trying not to make eye contact, and I was actually stopped by one of the TSA agents. He took my bag, he flipped through it, he looked at the other TSA agent, and he looked at me, and he said, "Sir, have a nice flight. So he gave me my bag back. So I always say, good old TSA. And went and sat in the seat of my plane.
And I'm not trying to help anybody commit a crime here, but if someone found that kind of cash in my bag, I would just say, yeah, I'm going to Las Vegas after this trip and needed some cash for gambling.
Yeah, that was going to be my excuse. I'm going to go because I was going to San Francisco, so I'm going to go to Vegas after that. And actually, in one of my presentations last year, somebody in the audience said it's actually only illegal to do that. So legally, you can carry it across. And their compliance officer was like, "Well, how do you know that?" So,
Wait, so
yeah.
it's when is it illegal to carry cash?
So on the customs form, do you have over $10,000 internationally? You have to declare it, or you have to have some reason for it. But domestically, I was told that you could carry whatever you wanted through the airport.
Yeah, I mean, like I legitimately would go to Las Vegas and play poker
Yeah,
around then, and I didn't know if my ATM card would be able to take out $10,000, so I would go with that kind of cash in my
right.
bag. So, but I could see why you were nervous about it. But it seems to me once you're kind of conspiring to do payoffs, that feels very illegal. Like as
Exactly,
opposed to like
exactly.
people telling like, "Hey, I heard something from a Moody's analyst." Like then you could argue, "Oh, it's gray area. I didn't know if she was serious or not." Like no matter how much they know, you could just say, "Oh, yeah, people talk about acquisitions all the time. Half of them happen, half of them don't. I did my own research. There was risk in definitely in doing this, so blah blah blah." Like like the essence of the law is you have to take risk. And so if you could
Right.
basically describe how you took risk, then it's not illegal and you could say you didn't know it. But when you're actually paying for information, that strikes me as over the line.
Exactly, and that's where the criminal element comes in. So the SEC is the civil, and Department of Justice, FBI is the criminal. And so once you're doing something like that, like cash payoffs, you're totally, you're not just answering the phone. Maybe this is vague, like you're actually all in. So it's sort of like the frog in boiling water, where the frog, you put it in cold water and turn it up slowly, and the frog boils to death. Like it's that slippery sort of incremental approach to this, where by the third trade, I'm going through the airport with cash in my body. Didn't start there, but got there eventually when I was all in, on this conspiracy.
Let me ask you a question. Could you have said, "Hey, I'm not involved. I don't want to be involved in this," and then you just start you're trying to cultivate your own sources? Like you could have been friends with the Moody's guy and taken him out drinking, or you could have, I don't know, cliche, but gone through the garbage can at different
Right.
companies and tried to find stuff. Like I think if one is actively looking for inside information, my guess is it's possible to find it. I don't know.
Yeah, I could have told her, when she said, "Tom, write this guy a check," I could have said, I would never do that. And by the way, I got to stop doing this with you because this is like, this feels totally illegal. But I felt because she told me he knew who I was, I just
That's
wasn't
scary.
thinking at all. I thought, oh my God, this guy knows who I am. He knows. And so I just freaked out, got this money together. Not once did I actually just push pause and think like, what the heck am I doing? Is this Moody's analyst going to go to the FBI and say I didn't pay him a bribe? Not thinking clearly at all.
And my her doing this sounds very suspicious to me. Like either she's trying to trap you, or like you said earlier, she's trying to groom you. So she's trying to get you in. Like, hey, you're a part of this now. You can't run away. Like it seems like otherwise, because initially it sounded like she's just being quote unquote a friend, or like, hey, you did this for me, I'm gonna do this for you. But now it sounds like there's something suspicious in what she in her behavior. Did you ever find out for sure why she suddenly started bringing you closer in like that and engaging you in the illegal activity?
I would learn later that she didn't really talk to many people. She knew, she talked to Rajaratnam. So she was paid by a hedge fund in New York to get information for them. And like, she would talk to me. Like when I saw her at conferences, nobody really liked her. She was very abrasive personality. So I think one of my character flaws maybe was I always like to bring people in that were sort of discarded, like just to talk to people. And so I think she was really happy that I would even talk to her. So that's why we, stayed engaged, I think. And like, she would live in Silicon Valley. I lived in New York. So she would go on every bus tour, visit every company, get the latest and greatest on what management teams were saying because, management teams say one thing one week, one thing the other week, the stock could move on that. So she would sort of be my eyes and ears in Silicon Valley.
And by the way, like some inside information is good and some's useless. Like let's say someone said, "Oh, we're gonna beat earnings estimates." They could beat earning estimates and the stock will fall
Right.
20% that day. Like
Right.
I don't know even what's considered inside information because some things do involve like heavy amounts of risk, even if you know it. But there's a whole philosophical case on either side of insider trading. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But okay, so now you're actually not only are you paying, but you're talking to the people you're giving information to and asking for money to help pay this woman. So did any of them freak out or were they like, "Oh yeah, of course, here you go, Tom."
Yeah, they just passed the hat around as I would learn, put the money together, gave it to me, and then I went out and gave it to her. So
Weren't
They
you
could have
scared
also
though
told
that
me
a
no.
lot of people were saying your name then, involving in sentences involving insider trading?
Yeah, no, I should have been. I should have been more alert. I mean, nobody was arrested yet up to this point, so this was all happening before any discussions with the FBI or anything like that. But I was told. So the guys that actually gave me the cash told me that they knew other people were engaging this type of behavior with cash payouts for sources. So I was able to rationalize, well, this is like a normal course of doing business, which of course it wasn't. But
This reminds me also of like and we don't have to describe what this is, but the whole mutual fund timing scandal. Literally everybody was doing it, but then literally everybody suffered because it was all illegal. So like it's
right,
the
right.
argument like everyone's doing it just means everyone's going to go to jail. So the other thing that was interesting to me in what you were saying,
The boss looking the other way, or
boss looking the
yeah,
other way, it struck me that maybe he looked the other way because he probably wondered like, why is this guy in so many trades that a week later get acquired? And then he probably figured, listen, as long as I don't know anything,
yeah,
it's good for me. And I'm going to specifically look away and never ask him about it. And so if the
yeah.
FBI ever asked me, well, did you ask me? I don't even know. He had discretion. I don't even know what trades he made. Like, I was just focused on my own trades.
I think that's what it was. Like if he could quote be an ostrich and put his head in the sand and say, sort of keep up your short-term trading there, Tom, but don't tell me how you're doing it. He was never charged, so maybe it worked out for him at the end of the day by not asking me the questions. So, in my talks today, I always tell senior people, you have to ask the junior person questions. You have to ask about short-term performance. You can't just say, keep it up, and not ask the question. So, but for me, not even firing me. Okay, the first trade was a takeover. Like, how did I know about that? I should have been fired. So I kind of felt he was okay with it. He asked me for the short-term performance. We have to start making money every month. And so I kind of felt, all right, he's fine with this. I'm fine with this.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, like you mentioned, these were investors that had 3-year time horizons, but there's still a lot of pressure to make money every single month.
Yes.
And, so many hedge funds blow up or do unethical activity because if they're not up every single month, investors get concerned. They have a hard time raising money. Like, why? How did you? The dream was to make 1% a month, and then the saying was, if you can make 1% a month, you'll raise $1 trillion. Even though 12% a year didn't really seem like a big number for hedge funds back in 2000 or early 2000s, because some hedge funds were making so much more. But you have Madoff is the classic example where he made 1% a month. He was, and I say this being Jewish, he was called the Jewish T-bill, because it's like 12% a year, steady, never a down month. I used to invest in these things called pipe funds, and they had a tendency to make 1% a month, and it's just all bad. Like whenever you see someone making a solid 1% a month, that's
Yeah.
just bad news.
Yeah, no, it's never good.
So okay, so what's next? So you're at the smaller fund, you start making, these trades. Now you're getting more and more involved. And what's next?
So it was 4 trades over the course of 2007. She would call me. I would place the 0.9% position. Only one cash payoff for the third one. So after the fourth one, it just sort of stopped coming from her. I suspect maybe she was approached by the FBI or the SEC or something, asked about her trades. But so that was September 2007 was the fourth trade. All 0.9% positions. What I personally made as the junior partner, in other words, what did I throw my career away for at the end of the day? My personal take as the junior partner was $46,000 on these trades. And to your point, when it's often small amounts that they get you on, it was $46,000, basically the price of professional suicide, at 29 years old at that point. And then fast forward to July of 2008, I'm living at 55th and Broadway, going to drop off my dry cleaning before getting a cab to work, stepped on the sidewalk, and this guy behind me said, "Are you Tom?" And I turned around. It was 2 FBI agents with the wallets out, dark suits. FBI, come sit down with us. We went and sat down. There's a Wendy's at 55th and 8th. We sat down there, and he's like, "Look, man, we know about your 4 trades. We know that you were just down in Atlanta visiting your baby nephew Carter for his baptism 2 days ago." And I was, and my head was spinning. And the first thought, James, with the FBI in my face was, oh my God, my dad's going to kill me. What's he going to say? I'm still young. All he could talk about was my success. When he finds out about this, it's not going to be good. I thought, oh my God, my wife's going to find out. I had just gotten married. She had no idea I was doing this. And then I thought, oh my God, this might impact my career. Oh my God, I might be going to prison. But it went from dad to prison. And I immediately started making implicating statements. Yes, I made those 4 trades. In fact, you won't believe this. At one point, she asked me for $15,000. I'm going through LaGuardia, and the FBI is like, go on, go on. So I kept talking to them, and he said, I want to stop you there, Tom. He said, do you know of illicit trading going on in the industry? And as we were talking about it, I said, yeah, it's quite rampant. He pulled out this web of names of these insider trading tipping charts. If people have seen them, it's like circles and arrows. He had two big targets at the top. I couldn't see the names. That the FBI had whited the names out to me, but he had two big targets. So I assume one of those guys was probably Rajaratnam. He folded this up. He gave me his card. He said, Tom, you have the opportunity to help us build some of these cases. It's going to help you out. I took his card and said, should I talk to an attorney first? And the FBI said, we'll let you know when you can do that. So,
Wow. So a couple of things there. One is, you know, there's Miranda rights where they say everything you say and do can be held against you. They never say, and this is very important to realize, no one realizes, they never say anything, some things you say and do can actually help you. They never say that because nothing you can do can help you. You can only hurt yourself. There is no way to actually help yourself in these first conversations you have. Which is why you always need a lawyer, particularly when
yeah.
whether or not you even did something guilty or innocent. Like, it could, because things, even if you're innocent, things you could say can only hurt you. So, and they don't know. They need someone in jail. Uh, uh, so you obviously didn't think about that because you were scared and you thought that helping them would help you, which maybe it did. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's often a fishing expedition. Like, we didn't even know what Tom knew, if he knew anything, but he traded these four stocks just like these other people who had information. Let's go scare the shit out of this guy, dropping off his dry cleaning, see if he talks. And it is a real case where there could be somebody who did not do anything with inside information, trade a stock, and another fund had the inside information, trade the stock at the same time. The FBI runs around Midtown and, like, scares everybody to see who's talking. So to your point, I could have actually not been guilty and still been approached by the FBI because of well-timed trades. If I start running my mouth and not saying, hey, I'll take your card and have counsel call you, I could be in trouble.
Yeah, no, and I know people who actually were approached who really were innocent of trades. They just happened to, they used actually quantitative systems to see when there was like buying pressure in the options. They would basically use quant to figure out where insider trading was occurring. And so their trades would match insider trading. But so you said they had this chart, and the chart was kind of all the funds that they thought were doing insider trading.
Yeah, that's right. They had they were all whited out to me, so it was just a bunch of circles and arrows leading up to two big circles at the top. So I kind of surmised maybe there's two big fish they're going after. Probably, Rajaratnam. I was just guessing at that time, and so yeah, so I could see that there was like at least probably 100 names on this piece of paper. It was massive.
I mean, back from the years of 1999 to 2007, 2008, when your specific case and Raj's case, Galleon, came out, uh, uh, I would say I even saw, from my limited perspective, a huge amount of insider trading. Like, it was just everywhere. I didn't do anything. That wasn't my type of fund, but I knew just so much stuff. Like, it was just insane. What happened next?
So yeah, so the FBI says, "We'll let you know when you can talk to an attorney." So I took his card. I went to the office that day. So it was July of 2008. We're getting crushed, financial crisis. So I'm totally white. I don't think my partner was suspected me of anything because, again, we were not doing well. So I said, "Sorry, I'm late." That afternoon, so I'm Catholic. I went to St. Patrick's for a confession. The first time in a long time. I married a Catholic, so I became Catholic for marriage. Talked to a priest. I had to talk to somebody. I was like, not. I don't think I was suicidal, but I was in a very dark place. Talked to a priest. I don't know who I talked to, but talked to him for a long time. He was like, probably thinking, why do I have to get this guy? Telling him the story, and he said, Tom, it sounds like 99% of your life you've lived the right way. 1% of your life you really screwed up, but you can't let this 1% define what you're thinking about doing to yourself, that type of thing. If the FBI is giving you a chance, Tom, to help them out, you should help them out. So I left St. Patrick's, called the FBI, and said, what does it even mean to help you? I'm not even sure. What are you talking about? Help you build cases? And the FBI is like, and I hadn't talked to an attorney. The FBI said, you know what you're going to have to do for us, or they said, you know what you're going to have to do for your country is wear what's called a body wire.
What is a body wire as opposed to just wire?
Yeah, so body wire, there's pictures of people with something taped to their chest. It doesn't look like that. At that time in 2008, it was about an inch or two big. So back then, when we all carried Blackberries around, it was about the size of a battery for a Blackberry. It would fit in my front dress shirt pocket. And the FBI basically said, who do you think would be of interest to us? And so I made a list of who I felt were the worst actors in the industry, but not really like peers, maybe like a 48-year-old hedge fund manager. I'm a 29-year-old analyst, but people I knew like reputationally were always having well-timed trades or would talk about it. So at the conferences that I'd attend, I'd build closer relationships with these guys, sort of playing up to their egos. Hey, I knew about these 4 trades last year. I might be getting more. How do you do it? And eventually people would start talking to me about how they got inside information while I'm wearing the wire. I was very bad though with these conversations because if I'm asking you about a well-timed trade you made a few years ago, you might look at me like, I don't know this kid that well. And he's all of a sudden asking me about this trade. They would often say nothing. And then I would get nervous and like fill the silence in. And the FBI would play it back later and say, Tom, you're not doing a good job. You have to let the person talk. And of course, I'm like, this is my first time ever doing this. I mean, I've never done something like this before. But eventually I got good about letting the other person talk, playing up to their ego, and getting them to talk to me about what they would say is a cover story for any illicit trade that they did. That way, the FBI had that, and I guess that implied then they had intent to break the law.
So,
So
I would think to myself, if I'm the FBI, I would say, let's give Tom some information and and you know, entrap people. First off, you can entrap people, but second off, it shows that you're legit and people then start opening up to you to get more information. So they start giving you their information. So A, they'd be trading on your tips, which may or may not be, there's a gray area there when the FBI, if the FBI is feeding you the information, but then later they might return the favor, and then that would certainly be illegal. So did the FBI consider giving you real information or allowing you to continue getting information and paying for it?
they didn't approach it that way. I think, like you said, it's a very gray area. Like if they're actually having me record the crime being another crime being committed, but that's for purposes of cooperation. It wasn't like that. It was just me saying, "Hey, I had these 4 trades. Hey, I have this Moody's analyst who might have something for me in the future. I'd be happy to share with you. How do you do it? How do you get these sources? Like these types of people." Eventually, people would start talking to me. So for 2 years, I was just running around undercover working at my hedge fund still in 2008 and doing like a double life as an FBI informant in the industry. In 2009, I left my firm and I kept working for the FBI undercover.
Well, why did you leave your firm?
Basically, my performance was terrible in 2008, like many people. And so I told my boss, and I couldn't handle being an informant and working. And so I kind of felt my name would be leaked to the press any day too. So I didn't want to be working. So I just told my boss, hey, 2008, I'm leaving the industry. This is not for me anymore. But I continued to work with the FBI undercover in 2009.
If you didn't have a hedge fund though, how did people like that? Again, I keep thinking of like soap opera style FBI. Like they could have set you up with $1 billion hedge fund, and then you would have like
Right.
totally been over the whole industry. Like, but I guess they didn't consider stuff like that.
No, they didn't. And so when I was out of work, I was just going in for job interviews or networking and say, hey, I'm trying to get back to another seat. This is how I get information. This has happened to me on 4 times, 4 trades last year. I'll probably be able to get more information. So that was under the context of those conversations, just like meeting people at Starbucks who I thought would be interesting to the FBI.
You would tell people at Starbucks like, "Hey, I get information. Sometimes they give me a call with real takeover information." Like, you would admit to these people in a job interview?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, or just networking with people of interest. Like, could you help me out if you know that any seats are opening up in the industry? Like, this is what I've been able to do, and so people would eventually start talking to me about how they got information. One guy, James, who I got in like 15 conversations that year, he would always say nothing. He would change the subject. He lived in Greenwich. I still lived in Manhattan. He called me one Sunday afternoon, and he's like, "Tom, we need to have dinner tonight. We need to talk." And so I called the FBI. I said, "This guy you want wants to have dinner with me tonight on a Sunday." They got excited. They met me at Grand Central train station, gave me the wire. I took the train out to Greenwich. This guy picked me up at the train station and he said, Tom, good to see you. I brought swim trunks for you. We're going swimming at my mother's house. So this is out in Greenwich. The Sopranos was popular that summer, so all these ideas are going through my head. I played it cool, got into his car. I was like, all right, yeah, let's go swimming. I was used to wearing the wire. I was kind of nervous though, because he's on to me. We go into this old mansion in Greenwich. He starts disrobing in this room, so he wants to see something with like taped to my chest, like a wire like that. It was in my front dress shirt pocket. I excused myself, went to the restroom, took the wire out, put it in my jeans, and then took my jeans off and put these swim trunks on. So the wire now is in this bedroom. So it's the two of us in our swim trunks walking out to this pool. It was so quiet. I saw like a shovel against the house, a hole in the ground. I thought, oh my God, is this guy going to try to kill me or something? And he was just having some landscaping done. And we got in the swimming pool.
Was he like a huge hedge fund manager, or was he like an employee at a hedge fund?
No, he was a pretty big guy, like a pretty big, well-known name. I guess at that
Like
time.
a billionaire hedge fund manager?
Yeah, maybe not that level, but like centillionaire. Yeah, for sure. And so we got in the swimming pool, and he grabs a tennis ball, and we're playing this awkward game of catch. He's pouring it on psychologically. And after a few minutes of freaking me out, he said, Tom, you've been acting kind of weird the last few months in our conversations. He said he spoke to an attorney, and I have to answer his question truthfully. And at this point, I was going to give it my cover. I'm not a good swimmer. I'm in this guy's pool. What's going to happen next? I'm freaking out. He said, Tom, have you been approached by the SEC? And truthfully, I could say, no, not the SEC. He didn't catch that nuance. So he starts making implicating statements about all these questions I'd asked him about because he felt more comfortable not seeing a wire on me in the swimming pool. He was actually never charged by the FBI because they didn't get that conversation recorded. So he was actually never charged. He was one of the worst actors I felt in the industry, and they never got him, I think, because I didn't record that conversation.
How do you know he was one of the worst actors? Like, because it sounds like you hadn't given him any information yourself.
Just reputationally, I would ask other people, whose business model is MNPI, or Material Non-Public Information Trading, and I got this guy's name over and over again. So I knew him sort of peripherally through these conferences and built a closer relationship.
I mean, if I were him, right, there was probably staff at the house while you guys were in the pool. I would have had someone go through all your clothes and bags and whatever and photograph everything that was in your pockets, because then he would have figured it out right away.
Yeah.
If people are really paranoid and they're dealing with hundreds of millions of dollars, why don't they do this intelligently? And again, I'm not advocating anything like it's clearly illegal. It's bad behavior. It took advantage of lots of people. But I just wonder why people are so arrogant they think they can get away with this stuff. So it only requires a little bit of intelligence. We're just riffing here on a call, and he would have gotten you then. Like if he had
Yeah,
done
he would
basic stuff.
have totally. But he felt because it wasn't taped to my chest, I guess I passed his test of what I was doing. But yeah, anybody could have gone through my jeans and found it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, like a 1950s technology wire, he did not find on you. So
Right, and he thought he got me with the SEC question, and so sometimes the SEC does the case before the FBI, and with my situation, it was just the FBI was on me before the SEC, so I could truthfully say, haven't talked to the SEC, but didn't say anything more than that. So yeah.
And but how did that conversation end? Did he want information, or he was just like, "Hey, I just wanted to check you out. We'll call you later."
He's like, I wanted to check you out, and then let's stay in touch. But sorry, I put you under this pressure, but I had to check you out to make sure you weren't wearing a wire, basically.
Now, if I were
he didn't go
you,
through the jeans.
I would ask for a job. Like, hey, you could say, "Hey, I'm totally legit. Can I have a job? You brought me out to your mom's house. Like, what's going on? Why'd you do this?" So, like, I would have pushed back a little bit.
Yeah, no, I was just ready to get out of the pool, get back home.
Yeah.
So it's just like, how about we can end this situation quickly?
This is such a valuable service for all business owners, big businesses, small businesses, doesn't matter. I wish I had this in the many different businesses that I've started. Sometimes it seems like your business is humming, but then suddenly you don't understand it. You're starting to fall behind. You're not understanding where your costs are, where your revenues are, where your payments are. Teams are buried in all sorts of like BS work, and you can't seem to close the books. So you need like one dashboard, one source of truth. I'm jealous of this business, NetSuite from Oracle, of course, NetSuite by Oracle. I wish I'd come up with this idea. It's a brilliant concept to have all your business intelligence on one dashboard. This is why you need to know these three numbers: 37,000, 25, and 1. So 37,000, that's the number of businesses which have upgraded to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, streamlining accounting, financial management, inventory, HR, and more. 25. NetSuite turns 25 this year. That's 25 years of helping businesses do more with less, close their books in days, not weeks, and drive down costs. 1, because your business is one of a kind. So you get a customized solution for all of your key performance indicators, your KPIs, in one efficient system with one source of truth. Manage risk, get reliable forecasts, and improve margins. Everything you need to grow all in one place. So right now,
Download NetSuite's popular KPI checklist designed to give you consistently excellent performance absolutely free at netsuite.com/James. That's netsuite.com/James to get your own KPI checklist. netsuite.com/James. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin, or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So this holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get two memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply. So Galleon was this huge hedge fund. People don't know that it was like multi-billion-dollar hedge fund focused on stock picking. And I say that because some hedge funds don't. You have many ways. There's many ways to invest in stocks. Stock picking usually requires getting good information and doing some analysis, legit, and investing in stocks. So Galleon was a good tech hedge fund that did stock picking and supposedly had great analysts. Like, what was your involvement with them? And they were multi-billion. They were one of the biggest hedge funds at the time.
Yeah, no, I knew people there that were later charged, and so but didn't know, like, personally, the head guy or anything like that. Like, I was just a lowly analyst, but knew of those people, knew that they were, working with the FBI, or targets of the FBI. And so the first arrests were October 2009. If you remember that day, there was like 30 people in handcuffs in the industry.
Yeah. I remember the famous photograph of Raj handcuffed and walking away, the perp walk.
Yeah, exactly. So at least 20 people arrested that day. All those criminal indictments were unsealed, or the SEC enforcements were unsealed. So Roger Adam was arrested. Like 20 guys were in handcuffs. Some of the guys at SAC were arrested. And so in the Wall Street Journal, the only name that wasn't revealed was called TipperX. And I was reading this for a few minutes. They didn't tell me I was TipperX, and I quickly figured out. I told my wife, I think I'm TipperX. And CNBC ran a story, who is TipperX? They didn't mention me. They mentioned people who I'm sure were very upset to be mentioned with this. So at this point, I'm 30. I'm still working with the FBI undercover. I'm still actively helping them build these cases.
How are you making a living?
So I wasn't really doing. I got a little bit of a payout from the hedge fund I could float off of, and thank God my wife had a job, so we weren't single income household, so she was able to hold down the fort and pay the bills.
And what was her
But
response when you first told her that you were involved in all these things?
yeah, great question. I was only allowed to tell her. I couldn't tell my parents or anybody else except for her. The FBI, so back in July 2008, approached me on a Tuesday morning. I waited till Friday after work to tell her after I talked to the priest and told the FBI I would cooperate. So Friday after work, young couple in New York City, how was your week? Glass of wine. I'm like, let me go first. I have, I have something I have to tell you. And she had been working at Lehman the whole time, so she had all the stories up to this point. And I sat her down and said, "You won't believe this, but Tuesday the FBI approached me on the street, confronted me about some insider trading, asked me to help them." And she was like, the way she took it, she's like, "Oh, wait, say that again." I think she was preparing to hear something about like I'm leaving her or something, but I told her that again, and she said, "Oh my God, like this is insane, but you didn't do anything to hurt me, and you're going to figure out a way to get us out of this." 85% of marriages would end right there. I mean,
Really?
usually the wife married the hedge fund guy, and so I found a stat where if a spouse commits a felony after marriage, 85% of marriages ended. It wasn't easy, but she stayed with me, so thank God at least I had some support in my life going through this. But most wives would have jetted. I mean, I wouldn't have blamed her. We just got married. We had no kids. Like there was nothing to tie her down.
Well, let me ask you, like, what if she had left right then? And let's say you're like, screw this. I'm just getting out. Like, what if you just like left New York, moved to Kansas City, worked at a grocery store? Like, would the FBI have found you and put you in jail from there? Or like, what would have happened, you think?
Yeah, if she had said, I'm out of here, and I'm like, oh, screw the FBI, I'm going to go somewhere else. I mean, they would have found me, and at least I would probably not have cooperated, and then I would have been charged and went to prison for a few years for the 4 trades I did.
Wow. And so thank God she was on your side, and she was seeing her own stuff at Lehman Brothers, I'm sure, at the exact same time.
Yeah,
So like it was just a few
yeah.
months later that Lehman Brothers was destroyed.
That's right. It was like the month before all the arrests happened. So 2008. We say now if we made it through 2008, we could probably make it through anything. It's
Yeah, sure.
crazy.
So
Yeah.
okay, so you weren't making a living during this time in 2009,
Right.
but you were still providing tips and all this kind of stuff. Were the tips like how were you like what was the sample where you gave a tip that was useful?
So I would just sit down. So I wasn't actually giving stock tips, but just in terms of like who the FBI should approach. Um, I would sit down again, talk to somebody of interest from the FBI that was on their list, and then get that person into a conversation about one time. Maybe there's a stock that they traded well every quarter where I suspected they were getting illegal information. Eventually, get them to talk about how they were getting that information. It was somebody inside the company that they knew. They would say just enough where the FBI would play it back and say, "Okay, Tom, your work's here done. We're going to approach this person at some point later." And the FBI would always tell me they're not going to know it was me. I'm not sure how they navigated that because I wore a wire so many times that year. And so finally, well into my cooperation, the FBI told me to talk to a lawyer. And you can imagine how this went. I Googled insider trading lawyers, Martha Stewart lawyers. That's all I knew about insider trading was Martha Stewart. I called a guy in New York and he's like, "Well, who was your attorney before me? You've been working with the FBI for a long time." I said, I've never spoken to an attorney. He said, "Tom, you're supposed to call me again the first day the FBI approached you." I said, "You know what? It's my first time doing this." So which is pretty straightforward for me. And so I had to plead guilty December 2009 with the FBI, with my attorney now. And then my name came out to the press in January 2010. The FBI asked me to wear a wire against two good friends, which I refused to do. And the FBI said, "Okay, tomorrow your name's coming out." So January 2010, the headlines are still out there, like TipperX is Tom Hardin. So now I realized that anybody in the industry that knew me at all in any professional capacity was like, "Holy shit." Most people were playing on the right side of the law, but we're like, "Oh my God." I talk to Tom once a year about, like, if we met at a conference and talk once or twice a year, all the compliance officers would take all these names from these cases and put them through the email at their companies and say, "Hey, analyst, why the hell do you know this guy Tom?" And of course, they were like, "I know Tom from Penn, or I know him from the industry." So this idea of who am I hurting starts to unravel. Like anybody that knew me at all, I was a total pariah at that point. And I've only heard secondhand that the worst day of some people's careers was having to say, "Oh my God, this guy TipperX, Tom Hardin, I know this guy. We talk occasionally." So I was definitely like all my LinkedIn connections were basically gone. Facebook, a lot of people cut ties, which I understand. But
But why would people in 2009 or even late 2008, why would people talk to you given that you weren't involved in the industry anymore? Like, why would people tell you? How did you get people to basically admit to doing illegal behavior?
Yeah, so 2008 I was still working, 2009 I wasn't, but I'd meet with people under the auspices of we're networking at getting a coffee, and I'm still looking for a job if they know of anybody who would be interested in hiring somebody like me who can get this inside information. And so that was the meetings I would have, and so they would just take the meeting, maybe a friend, mutual acquaintance set us up. So that was under the pretext of those meetings when I was out of work.
I see. So you're basically talking to other maybe young people, like probably not the top hedge funds managers,
Right.
but other young people who are kind of in the network, so
Right.
to speak. And so you're saying, "Hey, I'm trying to get a job. Would love to have a coffee. We've worked together before, blah blah blah." And then you would just meet, and then in the course of things, I can imagine each trying to one up each other. I get information this way. Well, no, I get
Yeah.
information this way.
Right.
And so you're able, and you probably just got better. Like, what do you
Yes.
think you got better at in terms of like getting information from people?
Getting people to talk, just sitting there, and if it's 30 seconds of silence after I ask the question, just sitting there with silence. I wasn't ever comfortable with silence. Like after a few seconds in the conversation, it can feel awkward to a lot of people, and you start filling the silence with whatever, change the subject. But once I got comfortable sitting in silence with people, eventually people would start talking. I always felt they must know I'm wearing a wire, so I thought in my mind they must think it's like huge on my chest. But eventually people would start talking because they would get uncomfortable with the silence. But I had to be just sitting there and waiting, letting them talk. Really,
And how did other people rationalize insider trading to you?
I think a lot of people it was being part of the group, being part of the quote in group, and so if it was younger people, they would say sort of like me. Now I'm part of this in group, sticking their chest out. It was more like a not so much about the money they were making, but more about the context they had. That was more that bravado of sticking your chest out. Here's my network. For older people, there was some people whose entire fund was just insider trading, and so I think I don't know, maybe that's more psychopathy or like that's another rationalization. But I think most people felt like, well, everybody's doing this. Some of these funds, the 13Fs, you could see them turning over literally with new positions before takeovers in 2006, 2007. So you kind of felt like this was the normal course of doing business for some of these firms.
Yeah, and did you like you mentioned you didn't want to wear a wire with two when they approached you about two of your friends, but did you ever feel bad about even though they're all doing illegal activity and you know we could argue all day about the ethics of it. The reality is it was illegal. Did you ever feel bad though, kind of snitching? You were a snitch.
Yeah, yeah, no, exactly, and sort of organized crime, I would be the snitch, and I would fear for my safety, obviously, even talking about this today. But at the time, I felt I was bringing the FBI people who were doing this like as their business, and so how did I rationalize this? Like working with the FBI, I kind of felt that I was bringing bad people, and so once it got to these two friends who I would have had to just take down because of something I gave them, I drew the line there. The FBI was not happy, but eventually that day they're like, "All right, your name's coming out tomorrow. You've done all you can for us. We're done with you." And so they didn't really give me any time.
Even though
Yeah,
you helped them with 40 cases on and you basically made 4 trades that made you $46,000, like, they just didn't give you any credit at all for what you did?
eventually at my sentencing, so I was sentenced years later to no prison, and the FBI wrote a great letter for me about my cooperation. But when I drew the line at those two friends, I didn't have any time to prep anybody else in my life for what was about to happen. It happened overnight, and so I flew my parents up from Georgia. They were going to come visit my first daughter, their first granddaughter. Told them individually, just awful conversations to have because all they could talk about my success. In Gwinnett County, this kid grew up here, went to Wharton, went to this hedge fund. I mean, they don't even know what a hedge fund is. They could just talk about my success, and have to tell them was absolutely awful. And have to tell the people in my life, like I had two brothers, two younger brothers. It was a very difficult conversation because people feel like, wait, you're doing this the whole time. Like I don't even know you, Tom. Like you have this double life. You did these trades. Like you're telling me this now, and I couldn't tell them other than my wife until my name became public. So I'm trying to do it as fast as I can, but the amount of damage I caused there, I guess it's not surprising, but it was a heavy time.
And how did you, after your name came out, were you worried about your safety then? Like, maybe the Rajas of the world, not Raj specifically, but I'm just any other hedge fund managers, anybody were you worried anybody was gonna try to find you and hurt you?
I should have been, but I wasn't really worried about that. The FBI always told me that they assessed the threat level of every target I was in front of, which I don't know if that was they were just saying that, but they were giving me that comfort. So it never really crossed my mind, like, oh my God, now I'd better get witness protection or or something like that. Like, Because more informant names were coming out through the course of that year. I just happened to be called TipperX and like the biggest, built the most cases for the FBI, but I didn't really fear for my safety.
Did you have to testify for any of the cases that you built?
It was weird. They never called me to testify. I was always one off. So I think I was getting people who then they would approach, who then would get the big people or the big trials. And so I was prepped a few times to testify, but never got called to testify.
So let me ask you some questions that are kind of like the gray area. So in the case of Galleon, which was the biggest one that I know of at that time, their claim was they would put together these like expert panels and they would pay people legit. Like there were companies that put together the expert panels. Galleon would hire these companies. Hey, I needed an expert panel on the semiconductor industry. And there would be employees from the semiconductor industry on these panels. And they supposedly would just pay for these panels to tell them things. And it was like a real gray area. That was their case, at least. There was a really gray
Yeah.
area whether that was inside information or not.
Yeah, so the mosaic theory, which is what they talked about, where you get all these little pieces of information and put it together and make a decision. So that was common, like expert networks. We used them at the time at my firm. I felt they were totally above board. I mean, but to the FBI, it was weird. Like, why would you pay this guy $1,000 an hour unless he's like giving you inside information? And there were a few expert network people charged, but at the time when I used them, it was fine. So that's, I guess, a gray area. But really, where it goes from illegal is it has to be material information. It has to be non-public. And the weird third stipulation is there has to be a breach of duty. Like somebody, like an insider, has breached their duty or breached their fiduciary duty to their company in sharing this information. So there's not an actual statute for insider trading. The former prosecutor, Preparara, is trying to put something together like a task force to actually make a statute for insider trading. So it's all prosecuted as securities fraud, which securities fraud covers Ponzi schemes. It's really a big umbrella, but there's not actually a specific statute yet. So it's kind of like judge-made law, where they can bring a case, they can expand the law a bit, which they did under Preparara. And some of those cases pre-brought were actually tossed afterwards because they expanded it too far. So that's kind of the nuances of the law.
So like for instance, you didn't breach responsibility. Like someone who started the information leak breached. Does there have to be a breach along the way, or does each person have to breach?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And some of the cases that were tossed were like the fifth or sixth guy down the chain answering the phone, getting the tip. Those cases were tossed because how would they know that there was a breach or where was it coming from? But because I had the cash payoffs, because it happened 4 times, and I suspected she was getting this information from the Moody's analyst. Like the legal term is like think mens rea. Like my level of knowing about this was enough to trigger criminal liability.
I see. So, but that's a little bit of a gray area. Like, was it or wasn't it?
Oh yeah,
Like, so,
yeah.
like your lawyer, maybe if you had called your lawyer day one, maybe it would have been different. Who knows? But like, or if you had said initially, listen, I appreciate what you guys are doing. I understand what you're asking. Let's talk tomorrow. I obviously have to call a lawyer first. Maybe they would have stopped there for all you know.
Yeah, that's my advice when I speak to hedge funds today. I'm like, if the FBI ever were to approach you, and it could happen, take their card, talk to an attorney. And so I never had any plans to even talk about this. So I was sentenced in 2015 to no prison because of my cooperation, but still a convicted felon. In 2016, one of the FBI agents heard me. My first time I ever told this story was on Rich Roll's podcast,
Oh, Rich
2015.
Roll, good friend of mine.
Yeah. So Rich had me on. I was sentenced. In my sentencing, an AP reporter wrote up my life story, like I was now a vegan ultra runner. So Rich's producer saw that in 2015, had me on, very raw conversation. I was just sentenced. An FBI agent heard me on Rich Roll, and in 2016, he called me and invited me to speak at the FBI about my situation, being very young, the pressures, the short-term rationalization, only 46,000. And the FBI gave me the idea back then to go out and share my story as a way to switch up compliance training with hedge funds. So the last 6 years now, I've turned it into like a sort of lemonade at the lemons type of situation. I go into a firm, hey, I sat in your seat. Here's how it happened. Here's how it could happen today. And so that kind of got me started speaking at the FBI. So they took me down, but then they gave me the idea to go out and speak about this. So
And how like is it so I can imagine you could be a good speaker for conferences in general because it's a good story and it's inspirational. You've come back from it and turned your life around and so on, and you held things together. And or how do you hold things together under stressful situations like this? Uh, you could give advice to hedge funds. How do you avoid this? You give advice to law firms. What's the actual law here? Because it's
right,
very gray. And there's one thing being a lawyer. There's other thing having experience at a very deep level
right.
with the law, which law firms sometimes are they're good to acknowledge that lawyers don't always know all the information about the law that people who experience the law probably know it more. And so you could build like a good business, like a thing. Have things been going well?
Yeah, it's been going really well. The first few years, I got, COVID wasn't great to be a professional speaker, so I
Yeah.
had to do everything over Zoom. But this year, a big bounce back year. It's really engaging to be out with people in crowds again at the conferences and to be able to tell the story. But I know it's the kind of thing, if I had heard this when I was 25, it probably wouldn't be my story. So that the FBI gave me this chance to sort of have redemption from this has been great. And to your point, I think these self-inflicted events in life can like define us forever, destroy people. I mean, there were several suicides in these cases, or it
Oh
can
my
develop
gosh.
you into something else. And so now I'm 44. I look back at myself at 28 and 29. If there's one thing I could tell myself back then is like, I think I was drowning in insecurity based on what the other guys in the industry were doing, and I wasn't part of that group. Where I should have just been focused on myself, like improving as an investor, self improvement, improving as a pattern recognition person, and not worried about what these other guys were doing. But I look back at myself, 28-year-old Tom was just drowning in insecurity about what these other guys were doing and not a part of that group. When she calls me, this is happening. Now I'm a part of that group. I just wish I understood my psychology better and had more self awareness in my 20s. So I have plenty of advice for myself in my 20s, but that's something today that I tell people, especially, I'll speak to these investment banks with these new people coming out of college and business school. They have no idea what they don't know. Like they're in their 20s now, and like I'll say galleon or whatever, they're like, "What the heck is that?" It's time moves on, so it's sort of, but the lessons remain the same.
Let me ask a different question now, though. Do you think, and by the way, I'm not like, let's just make it clear, insider trading is illegal. It's illegal to do it. Don't get involved. Anyone listening to this, don't get involved. But do you think it should be illegal? And when I say that, the first gut reaction must be, of course, because all these rich people are taking advantage of the people who don't know any information, and they're making more money. That's how the rich are getting richer, is through illegal activity. I'm just going to present the flip side, and then I'm curious about your thoughts. The flip side is the market benefits the more information is in the market. So, for instance, let's
Right.
say everybody knew, let's say insider information was legal, and some law firm leaked that, um, this company's getting bought by this company. And so now you would see, because it's legal, you would see the price in the stock market reflect these acquisition talks. So instead of in one day, it goes from 10 to 20 because the company's being acquired at 20, it would slowly or maybe quickly move 10, 11, 12 up to 20. So the actual price of the stock would more clearly reflect its value because more information was in there. And it's up to the law firm to plug their leaks. Like it's not,
Yeah.
society's fault. So what do you think where do you stand on this?
Yeah, no, and there's been plenty of academic white papers about why it shouldn't be illegal. To your point, we should have all the information in the market. I think there's a few countries in the world where it's not illegal. So I think we need to have the statute. Like, actually, what is it? The ambiguity around this law has existed forever, and the SEC loves that because you can bring a case, and you may not win that case, but you can just bring a case and maybe redefine the law, or as Preet did when he was the prosecutor in New York City for the federal prosecutor, like expanding the law because it's a judge-made law. I think we really do have to have a statute and define what it is so people know what it is, what it isn't, what they can do if they're in a gray area or not. But I think the system, the way it's set up, they love this ambiguity, that they love that it's judge-made. They love that they can get somebody, do the perp walks and all that, and maybe that person actually wins their case, but you've destroyed reputations. And unfortunately, the pendulum swings. I think some years they're focused on this, like they were with my case. And the last couple of years, they haven't been really focused on it. I was speaking to a professor, a statistics professor, who said suspicious trading now, and the data he tracks is at an all-time high. Like you'll see the Friday options activity and the Monday takeovers. That's like happening now at all-time highs. There
Wow.
hasn't been a whole lot of cases brought right now, but I think it's sort of political will about should we bring these cases now or build them. But I think the next couple of months and years we're going to see a lot more cases. So I think it's always going to be here to stay. But I wish we had a statute to kind of define what it is for companies who are all trying to hopefully do the right thing and not be caught up in something because the judge or a prosecutor is really ambitious and trying to make their career by expanding the law a bit. So I don't like those elements about it. I wish we just had a statute defining what it is.
Yeah, I mean, look, for you, have you ever thought about getting back into investing?
I haven't as much. So I can't have any actually brokerage accounts or anything personally. My
Wow.
wife has a cash account just in indexes. So, but what I'm able to do now actually is, so I've just been approved by like the Small Business Administration for financing to buy a small business, and you can borrow up to $5 million at the SBA to buy like a small blue collar business. So I'm actually looking at doing that as another business I can own because I'm not sure speaking it goes up and down with COVID and all that. Like, hopefully I have a long career with the speaking, but I'm all in on speaking. So for an investment, I could actually now buy a small, plumbing company or something and finance it by the SBA.
How do you get an SBA loan like that? Do you have to put up money yourself?
Yeah, so basically it's 80% SBA, 10% is usually a seller note. Like the seller will give you a note and then 10% down payment, up to a $5 million loan. Yeah.
So that's great. What kind of business do you think you might want to buy?
So right now I'm looking at like blue collar businesses, like there's 10,000 people turning 65 every day, like a pest control business with great recurring revenue or a pool cleaning business with the recurring maintenance revenue, and then have somebody run it as a general manager.
Jay, what's the name of the guy we spoke to who buys small businesses and helps other people identify good small businesses to buy?
Carl Allen.
Carl Allen, Carlallen. Yeah, we'll send
Yes.
you, Jay, can you send Tom the links to some of the episodes or some of Carl's stuff?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
This guy, he's bought and sold like hundreds of businesses, and he's helped other people do it, and he's very successful at it. Like, how do you know when's a good value? How do you do it where the seller puts up as much as possible? And he has all the statistics, like 80% of businesses just simply shut down because they never get sold, even though they were good businesses, cash flow generating businesses.
Thank
Because
you.
I would definitely check that out. He's very smart at this, and he got me excited about buying laundromats or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there's laundromats and
businesses that will-
restaurants.
yeah.
Yeah.
Restaurants, I don't know, because
No,
COVID showed that
yeah.
restaurants, could be problematic.
Pest control to me, it's like 98% recurring. Like most houses just pay a fee. Like it should be
Yeah.
recession proof. Like mosquitoes don't go away if we're in a recession. So,
The only thing I
Yeah.
worry about pest control is if it's a small business, then if the guy retires, your business is out of business.
Yeah. I want at least $500,000 EBITDA. Most of these businesses are like priced at like 2.5 times, 3 times EBITDA. So actually to finance it, it's very attractive. Whereas the FBA businesses have been bid up by the aggregators the last few years. Like everybody got into buying Amazon businesses, so those multiples are higher. So
Yeah, and you could look for businesses that don't do a lot of SEO, for instance, and you could start dominating on SEO. There's various ways you could improve the
exactly.
income. Can you buy a .com business, or it has to be blue collar?
No, I'm looking at .coms too, because for me, I think it might be easier to have a digital business or an FBA business, like an Amazon business, where if I'm traveling somewhere for speaking, I could run that, or have VAs running that. But I'm trying to find something where I can have another source of cash flow, to have the speaking and something else.
I would check out empireflippers.com
Mhm.
and flippa.com. Like, I get an email every day from empireflippers.com. And like the other day, for instance, I got, it was all about Amazon, what they call KDP businesses. So some guy will write 100 books about self-improvement. He'll outsource it, the writing, but maybe he'll outline it, whatever. And so they have 100 books. It's the 80-20 rule. 20% of the books generate 80% of the revenues, but they're generating, after 100 books, they might be generating 10,000 a month in income, and they built it up, and now they can sell it for 6 times annual income and some small multiple. But there are funds building out there which are buying, let's say, 100 of these businesses,
Mhm.
combining together, and now you have some back end synergy, so you can increase the income, and the size increases the multiple. So instead of buying 100 businesses for 6 times earnings, you now can sell one business for 9 times earnings, and you've increased the overall earnings. So it's like a classic roll-up structure. And those types of things are very interesting. So empireflippers.com and flippa.com.
Okay, yeah.
But well, look, Tom, good luck. Thank you for sharing your story. It's an intense story. I'm glad you were able to share it, and you inspiringly came through on the other side. And if you ever need any help with anything, or you want to come back on the podcast and talk about your pest control business, you're more than welcome to come back on anytime.
Thanks so much for having me on, James. It's great.
Tom, I appreciate it.
Thanks.
This episode is brought to you by Half Price Books, the local bookstore that has great holiday gifts for less. Take a trip to Half Price Books to pick up toys, video games, puzzles, and of course, books for everyone on your list. Or take it easy and get them a Half Price Books gift card. For a limited time, purchase a $25 Half Price Books gift card and receive a $5 bonus coupon to use in January. That's a gift for them and a gift for you. Get to it, gift giver. Visit hpb.com to find your local Half Price Books.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.